Hello. Welcome to the Seeking Heaven, the Near-Death Experience and Other Phenomena. I'm your host, Tamara Calder Richardson, a six-time near-death experiencer, evidential medium, and Christ channeler. If you haven't subscribed, subscribe and hit the bell to get all the alerts so you don't miss an episode. We have topics from experiencers of near-death experiencers, spiritually transformative experiencers, cryptid experiencers, and today we have a past life experiencer, and this one is very exciting. So let me tell you a little bit about our guest. I am so thrilled. This is so fascinating to me, this topic, and it's just such an unusual premise, because not only is this person our guest today a past life experiencer, they also are very analytical. They were a police detective. So today's guest, before I bring them on, let me tell you a little bit about them. And that will be Robert Snow. And Robert, he served 38 years for the Indianapolis Police Department. And he retired back in 2007. But for most of his career, he was involved with as an executive officer in the police department, captains of detectives. He was also the commander of the homicide branch. He also for 30 years wrote in different articles, he's got some examples to show you, whether it would be articles in Playboy, Reader's Digest. He's written over 20 books, and that would be about how to conduct a homicide investigation, as well as example cases and cold cases. And then a turn of events, he had a regression where he found out that reincarnation existed, which that's something that he did not believe in before was presented to him. And this unfolded to the point that he did his own research, used his own detective work, and found out about this past life where he was an artist in the 1900s called Carroll Beckwith. And so it's fascinating. And this changed his life. So I want to hear all about it. Let me bring him on. Robert, so nice to have you here.
Wow, thank you. Nice to be on your show.
Well, yeah, and tell us a little bit about, you had some books I asked you to bring about your detective books and so forth. Tell us about that part of your life before we jump into the really cool past life, because I want people to know about the past life, how this unfolded, how you were a skeptic, how you saw that, and what you learned about life and the afterlife, because the real juicy stuff. But I want to get into your career as a detective, and you've written a lot of books. You had one in front of you a minute ago.
Yeah, thankfully, I wrote a book. I wrote mostly police work books. This is one of my true crime books about a murder. It was about a cold case that was 30 years old that was solved by one of my detectives when I was in charge of homicide. But the book we're talking about tonight is this one. It's called Portrait of a Past Life Skeptic.
Yes, the Portrait of a Past Life Skeptic. Thank you. And I was going to say, I forgot to say that the most important. That's why we're here today, is this book, so we can discuss it. And you had a prequel called Looking for Carroll Beckwith, which I have, the prequel, which the cover is even cooler than this. It's got like a little translucent thing with an eyepiece on it. But so that this is an updated version about this experience of your regression, and then. And surprise, you found out about past life. I mean, that's just blows my mind that you were a skeptic and this came up. So, so tell us a little bit about, you spent 30 years as a detective in homicide, and you were at the top of your game.
Yeah, like I said, I was spent 38 years in the police department. I was a captain there for 22 of them, and I did a lot of jobs. I was a police department executive officer, and I was in charge of homicide for a number of years, and I was in charge of organized crime and various other things. But interesting enough, yeah, I never wanted to be a police officer. When I was growing up, that thought never occurred to me. But the one thing I ever wanted to be when I was growing up was a writer. When I used to say it when I was 4 or 5, people ask, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And I'd say a writer. And of course, now everybody pat you on the head. That's like saying you want to be president. Everybody say, "Yeah, that's nice, that's nice." But truly, it's the only thing I ever wanted to be. But I was in the military during the Vietnam War, and when my enlistment was up, I got out and come home, and I needed a job. I mean, wanting to be a writer and being a writer where you can make money is a big difference. It's a different thing. It's a lot of years of work to get there. So I needed a job. Well, my brother had joined the police department about a year before that, and he said, "Hey, come on down." They said they're desperate for recruits because everybody was getting drafted and going to Vietnam. I had already served my time there, so I went down to the police department and joined up. And it turned out to be very fortuitous because not only did I have a good job, it paid well and had good benefits, but I had got mountains of information for a writer. I mean, I kept notes my whole all 38 years. I kept notes of all the good things, all the interesting things I saw, so that I could turn them into articles, short stories, or books. And I wrote, like I said, before I started book writing, I'd written over 100 articles and short stories, and that's kind of way you work yourself into being a book writer. You kind of serve your apprenticeship that way. Before I started writing books, but getting into how I got into the regression, if you want to be a
Yes.
writer, you also have to be a reader. You can't just write all the time. You have to read, and you have to read from
Right.
all different fields, not just your field, because you want to see if you read something and the writer really handles this real well. You want to analyze it and see what he or she did, and see if you make sure you can do that. And conversely, if they do something bad, if it's a really sloppy writing, you'll make sure you don't do that.
This is
So
important, and I know this is silly, but this is important because I read a lot of books. I always have kind of been that way, and I'm surprised how many authors are horrible writers. You're not, though. Just gonna
no,
say
no,
you're
no,
very good,
yeah,
and there's quite a few that are good. Like your friend Wendy Rose Williams, excellent. Dr. Von Kaysen, excellent. There's some out there that are they're excellent, but I'm surprised how many are horrible, and they really need an editor.
yeah. Well, and that's the problem about being self-published, of course, is you don't have anyone outside your immediate family or something like that who's going to say good things about you no matter what. To really, I mean, because editors, a really good editor doesn't worry about hurting your feelings. They simply tell
Right.
you what your writing looks like and what you need to do to improve it. And so, it's well, I mean, again, I've always made who no matter where I published, they always had to pay me. I never published for free. I never paid to get published. I always made them pay me. So it's a little harder to get it started that way, needless to say. But you feel much better when you get your book published and they're sending you money rather than you send them money.
Right. Well, that whole field of writing has changed. I know we're
Yeah.
digressing a little bit, but it is interesting that whole field has changed. What do you think about self publishing?
Well, self-publishing is fine in certain cases. If you're a poet, you almost have to self-publish.
Mhm.
Nobody will buy your book of poetry, or if you have a something that is so local and localized that you wouldn't have any way to sell it outside your area, you might have to do that. But
Right.
other than that, being self-published. You have no distributor, so you pay to have all these books published, and so you got 500 books in your living room. How do you get rid of them? I mean,
Right.
there's the problem. You have no distributor as you do if you publish with a legitimate publisher. They
Mhm.
take distribution. They take care of it.
Right. Well, they're supposed to. You're right,
Yeah,
and that's what they're being paid for. Yeah,
yeah,
you're exactly
yeah,
right. So that
exactly.
just
And then every year you get a nice royalty check too. So that's the nice part too. Well, it depends what publisher. Some pay every 6 months, some pay every year, but you get a nice little extra income every year too. And if you can publish 20 books like I have, you can get a nice sizable check, every now and then. So,
that's true. That's
but
true.
back
That makes sense.
back to my story. But I've always been a very avid reader because I
Yes.
wanted to be a writer. Well, one time I had a book club. Belonged to a book club, and I saw they had a book by Dr. Raymond Moody called Coming Back. Now, Dr. Moody had done apparently a lot of research in the area of near death experience,
Right.
but this book about he had a friend who was a psychologist who did past life regression therapy, which is a therapy that doctors and psychiatrists and psychologists use for a person who has some kind of physical complaint, but there's no evidence for it this life. In other words, they say my elbow just
Right.
hurts all the time, but MRI and X-ray show nothing. Well,
Right.
finally, eventually, they'll send them to a past life regression therapist, and what they'll do is hypnotize them and supposedly take them back to the past life
Mhm.
where where this part of your body was injured. And quite often, they'll go immediately go to that life, and they'll tell they were on a battlefield, got hit by a cannonball in the elbow
Mhm.
type thing. And
Yep.
actually, it turns out this is pretty successful therapy. It works, has a very good rate of success. And so
Right.
awful lot of psychologists use it. Interesting enough, though, I gave a speech to an international conference of psychologists and psychiatrists who use past life therapy, and most of them didn't believe it was real. Most of them believe that the injury is psychosomatic, and so is the cure. That's before I gave my speech, obviously, but I gave a speech about my experience. But I
Right.
found most of them belonged. But anyway, I read Dr. Moo's book, and it's really a well written book. Interesting.
Mhm.
This psychologist took him back to 8 past lives, hypnotized him, and he wrote all about them. But at the very end of the book, he says Yeah, I don't know. He said, I don't know if it's my imagination or it's really true. And that's kind of the way I felt at the time. I thought, maybe it's true, maybe it's not. I don't,
Okay.
I don't think it. I think it's mostly imagination, mostly just dreamed up stories. So anyway, I didn't think anything about it. Went on to other reading. Well, a couple months later, I was at a party, and there was a lady there, Kathy Graven. Kathy is a child abuse police detective. My wife, by the way, was also a police detective, and she worked in child abuse for a lot of years. That's why I went to that party. But Kathy is also a practicing psychologist. And I didn't know at the time she used past life regression therapy in her practice. So we were talking about movies we'd seen and and TV programs, and we got around the books. And I remembered this book, so I mentioned to Kathy that I'd read this book, and she asked me, "What do you think about it?" And I said that I thought stupid. I thought it's just a bunch of hogwash from people, weak-minded people seeking. What they're trying to blame is this life on past life. In other words, the reason this life was so screwed up is not any fault of theirs; it's a fault of a past life type thing. And
Okay.
it was kind of late in the party, and I had a bit to drink. I'm sure I was pretty obnoxious because Kathy took it pretty well. But at the end, she finally dared me. Said, "Okay, if you think it's so foolish, won't you try it? And then you tell me it is." And at first, I said, "No."
Oh, it was a challenge. Oh, great. Okay, so Robert, all this time, yeah, it was over some drinks, and it was a challenge. Okay.
Yeah, she had basically dared me to do it. And I said, at first, I said no. Then she said, "Oh, you scared?" Now you don't ask a man if he's scared.
No,
You
you don't.
don't
You
say
don't
no.
ask a police detective if
Yeah,
you're
so I
scared.
finally said, okay, I do it. So she gave me the card of a friend of hers who did past life regression therapy, Dr. Mary Ellen Griffith. And I said, okay. Well, the next day I wake up and I'm sober and more clear. And I said, I'm not going to do that. That's silly. I'm not going to do it. But then it seemed like every day at least I'd run into Kathy somewhere. And she'd ask me, have you made the appointment?
Oh my
And then
gosh!
before this, I swore I didn't see that girl probably at least once every month or two. I'd see her,
Isn't
but
that
then
funny?
afterward, I would see her every day. I'd say, "That God, here she comes." I'd try to get away. I was hoping she didn't see me first because I had to keep making excuses to know I had two
Oh
meetings. I had this.
my
I
gosh!
had read reports. Finally, it got to the point. I said, "This is stupid. Now I
You're
can't.
running out of
You can't spend your
excuses.
life running and hiding person." So I called Dr. Griffith and made an appointment. But what I decided I was going to do, I was going to bring my own tape recorder to this session. I was going to record it, and I'm going to go back and show Kathy how stupid this whole thing was because nothing's going to happen. There's no such thing as past lives. This is all bull, and I'm going to take it. I'm going to take my recorder, then I'm going to show her. And I decided I would go to Dr. Griffith and I would cooperate 100%. Whatever she asked me to do, I would do just to show them how this is all stupid. This is not real. This is made up
Right.
stories by weak-minded people. So anyway, I went and seen Dr. Griffith. Very nice, very gracious lady, and she set me down on this couch she had, and she had me close my eyes, and she started having me describe things in a lot of detail. She wanted to use a lot of imagery. She tell me about your college graduation. Then she went on to high school and grade school, and I could see what she's doing. She kept getting younger and younger, and I'd think to myself, she would be a very good interrogator because I can anticipate her next question. But anyway, she said, "Okay, you ready to begin?" I said, "Yep." So I sat there on this couch with my eyes closed. She says, "See if you can see a balloon. Can you imagine a balloon?" Well, the window was to my right, and I could see a purple blob in my eyelids, which I knew was the light coming into the window to the right. And I said, "Yeah, I can see a purple balloon." She said, "Okie dokie." She said, "Now imagine yourself getting in the balloon." Okay. I'm just trying to be cooperative. I'm going to do everything she says. So I imagine myself getting a balloon. She says, now the balloon's going to go up. Okay. So it's funny though, when I was sitting there looking down at the bottom of my eyelids, I could see little points of light. But I assumed at the time it was just glare off the floor by my feet. So anyway, so we're in the balloon. She said, "Okay." So now I want you reach up above you, and there's a valve. There's a valve. Pull it. There's a little valve on a string. Pull it, and you'll take your balloon down. She said, "Okay." So we went through this probably 12, 15 times, but nothing happened. Because she basically pulled the valve, but nothing happened. Because I said myself, this is her daydream, not mine. I'm not going to imagine anything for her. I'm going to tell her what I see, which is nothing. So this went on probably 12, 15 times. She was still very nice. She said, "Okay." So now I want you. So can you imagine a mountain? Now I figured I must be getting tired by then because I could actually see it. Maybe you could see a mountain in your mind, but it was just a daydream type thing, nothing clear, vivid, anything.
Right.
And I go, "Okay, I can see a mountain." She said, "Now land the balloon at the mountain." And again, I assumed my mind was getting tired because I could see the balloon land on the mountain. She said, "Okay, can you see a building there?" And again, my mind, I could see like a log cabin there. But interesting enough, the logs were going vertical rather than horizontal. And one of my writers later wrote and told me that was the French method for building for building their log cabins. So anyway, she said, okay, now go into the cabin. What do you see? And I said, nothing. I mean, again, this is their daydream. I don't see, I'm not seeing anything. She said, okay, now imagine a big meal, lots of light and everything. So I'm trying to, I'm being cooperative. I'm trying to imagine all this. Then finally she said, okay. So now there's steps go out of the cabin. There's steps leading down to a valley. Now there's 12 steps, and I'm going to count them as you go down. So I'm trying to imagine this in my mind, be cooperative. And she starts counting 12. Then her numbers start getting longer. 11, 10. And I know what you do. I know everybody's seen, the stage hypnotists do this kind of thing. I'm almost laughing. I think it's so silly. It's, so 8, 7. But funny enough, when she got to 1, something really bizarre happened. All of a sudden, I was in a valley. I don't mean I was imagining it or I was daydreaming I was in a valley. I was in a valley. It was crystal clear. Matter of fact, I was walking along a path, going along a little brook, and there was a bush next to me, and I could see the veins and the leaves of the bush. That's how clear everything was. Now, again, I wasn't real stupid. I knew what happened. I realized I'd been hypnotized. Now, I said, well, even though I had thought before I went there that I was too strong-willed, I couldn't be hypnotized. But I realized, and I wasn't real stupid, I realized that you've been hypnotized, Bob. That's all there is to it. But funny enough, when I was walking along, I could see the leaves moving. I could feel a breeze blowing in my face. But I assumed at the time it was just the air conditioning in the office. So she asked me, said, look down, describe yourself. Now, so I look down, and I see some hairy, dirty legs and kind of gnarly feet. And I'm wearing some dirty, matted fur. In my left hand, I'm carrying a piece of a tree, look like a big piece of a tree limb. Everybody knows what. Everybody's seen movies and books and TV programs about cavemen. I knew that's what it was. Because I didn't realize till I listened to my tape later on that before I got to the bottom of the 12 steps, she told me, I want you to go back to the very first life you experienced on Earth. Go back to the very first one. I didn't remember her saying it at the time, but I'm looking down and I see it. But then something else funny happened. Not just the air thing is I suddenly knew where I was. I knew from the person I was in that this was his home. And I told her, Dr. Griffin, that I live up on the hill. There's a cave up on the hill. But the funny thing was, I was speaking before I was thinking. In other words, I didn't know what I was going to say. Usually in life, you got about a half second to realize what you're going to say before you say it. You still may say something stupid, but you know what you were going to say. In this case, I would just speak with not knowing I was going to say it. So she said, okay. She said, I want you to go to the cave. So I said, okay. So I went to the cave. And it's funny, as I started into the cave, I could tell whoever lived there was not terribly hygienic. I had this awful, awful smell. And I couldn't imagine where that come from. I just had this really awful smell.
Okay, so your senses are turning on now too, not just not just the wind. Now you're smelling things, and what you said about the speaking before you know it. That's how channelers do it. I can't explain it because it makes no sense to me. Didn't it seem odd to you when you just started saying, like, why am I saying this?
I just started talking and not knowing I'm going to say it. Just So anyway, we talked about my life a little bit, and she said, okay, now I want you to go to the point of your death. She said, apparently that's really important in a person's life. So rather than just go into it, there's maybe 4 or 5 seconds like a gray fog. I couldn't see anything. Then all of a sudden you come out of it, and I wasn't into my body anymore. I was floating above it. And I could see a little skinny little man laying on the cave floor. He was all covered in furs. He was coughing and hacking, and he looked terrible. He was really sick. Apparently I was dying. So anyway, Dr. Chris said, okay, now, said, what was the point of this life? What was your point? I said, and again, I'm speaking for I know I'm going to say anything. Right. I said, the point was to experience loneliness. I never had anyone in this life. I was all alone my whole life. That was the point. So she said, okay. So look up. Do you see a light? And sure enough, I look up over the valley. There's a light. It says, so now I want you to go to the light. I want you to go to a life where you did have someone. So I realize this. I realize what's going on. I've been hypnotized. I know this is not real. This is just the hypnotist playing with my mind. But truthfully, it was kind of cool too. It's kind of like if you go to Disney World, some other big amusement park, they have these great rides and they look real. I mean, you think it's real, it's real, but it's not. That's why I thought about this. This looks real. Okay. I mean, it's vivid and clear, but it's not real. So anyway, I went into the light, and again, 4 or 5 seconds, all I got is gray fog. Then suddenly I come out, but it's kind of like in the old days. If you go to a movie theater, sometimes movies start to be all blurry. And then all of a sudden it clicked into focus. Well, that's what happened here. Maybe 2 or 3 minutes, everything was real blurry. Then it clicked into focus. And I could see I was on a city street. But the funny thing is, it was a sunny day. I could feel the sun beating down on me. I felt the heat from
Okay.
something. And I
So
thought, this,
you were there. You were like, in all intents and purposes, there because you
yeah,
were feeling it as though it were happening.
it was. But the interesting part, I also knew I was in the office. I could hear noise outside the window in Dr. Griffith's office. I could hear her. She moved in the chair. But I also was there. It was just, again, I knew it was just hypnosis, but I thought it was really kind of cool. You know, it was kind of like an LSD trip without the danger, without the taking drugs or the danger of it. It's what it was. It was that vivid.
Right.
So anyway, Dr. Griffith said, okay, it's just where you at? And I described that. All of a sudden, I'm in a big city street, but it looks like the mid 1800s because there's all this horse-drawn carriages and there's gas lights. And Dr. Griffith said, okay. Says, now, where are you doing? I said, I'm going to meet a woman. Again, I'm speaking before I know what I'm going to say. She says, okay. You see, you meet the
Mhm.
woman. Where do you go? I said, we go to an outdoor cafe, and she orders some kind of special water and I order a glass of wine. Now, we talked about metagraphs. She goes, okay. So now I want you to go 5 years forward. Okay. So I go 5 years forward, and all of a sudden, again, you get 4 or 5 minutes of fog, then you're back, and I'm standing in a hallway of an apartment building, and I'm having this really vigorous argument with somebody about money. I'm assuming it's my wife.
Okay.
It's a woman. Assume. So anyway, after a little bit, I just walk away, and I walk down the hallway, and I walk in the room, and I tell immediately there's an artist studio. The walls were just covered with dozens of paintings. The ceiling was all skylights, and to the right wall was solid windows. And I suddenly knew that this is where I worked. That I was a painter. This is where I worked.
So you
So
just
anyway,
knew this.
yeah. So we're talking. I talk about coming. She said, "Okay." She said, "Now go to. I want you to go to 5 years. You know, go for forward." She said, "Fine." She said, "I want you to go to your death." She said, "Go to your death and tell me what you regret about this life." And I told her immediately. I'm speaking without knowing what I'm saying. I said, "I regret we didn't have children because my wife couldn't have children." So
Wow.
anyway, so the next moment I'm seeing myself going. I'm in a laying on a bed. I see myself going out of my body. Not everybody see movies and TV programs about ghosts. Ghosts always come out of bodies like that. And I see myself coming out. And I pass through the roof of the building I'm in, and I see I'm over a huge, huge city. There are lights to the horizon in every direction. So Dr. Griffith said, "Okay, go into the light." But I
Mhm.
didn't. And that's the serious thing about hypnosis. I mean,
You did.
everybody's seen these TV programs. I mean, or stage it was to make you cluck like a chicken. That's not really. When you're in hypnosis, you're still in control. You know what's going on. So Dr. Griffith said, "Go in light." I didn't. Instead, I saw myself flying through some woods, and I could tell it looked like a fall night because it was looked like cold out, but the trees still had all their leaves. So anyway,
Okay.
for a few seconds later, I'm on the second or third story of a mansion somewhere. I'm looking in the window. Now, in this room I'm looking into, there's a roaring fire at the fireplace. Nobody's in the room, but over the mantle of the fireplace is a painting, and it's one of my paintings. I told Dr. Griffin I wanted to see one of my paintings before I left. I look at it,
Oh,
and it's a still life. It's got bottles and fruit and a big sun in the background.
oh
So
wow.
finally, I left that. I left that. Finally, she said, "Go into the light," about 4 times. I said, "Okay." So I finally went to the light. She said, "Now I want you to go to a life in which you were a woman." And I almost started laughing. And I thought, yeah, that's going to happen. Well, anyway, so you got, again, 4 or 5 minutes of fog. And sure enough, I'm in some woods again. But this is not in the valley. This is all level woods and it's not the same
Mhm.
kind of trees. And I looked down.
Mhm.
I see, sure enough, I was a woman. Now I'm really thinking this is bizarre because I'm thinking I figured most of this other stuff is old movies I'd seen or books I read or TV programs just regurgitated from my subconscious mind and made into stories. But I'm trying to think where could I got this from? So anyway, she asked me to describe what I'm standing. I'm standing, looking at this big. It looked like a big altar. It was a circular with pillars and had a big altar in the middle. And she asked me, she says, "Where are you at?" And I immediately said, "I'm in Greece." Now I had
Okay.
no idea why I said that. And anyway, she had me describe that what I did there. I told her I was a young woman. There's a bunch of us who brought things down the altar. I said we all had to be virgins, and this guy, they do work here and all this. So she said, "Okay." She says, "Go." So I want you to go 5 years into the future. Go with the five. Would you go 5 years ahead? See what you see. So if I go 5 years, and all of a sudden I'm in a wagon being pulled by oxen, and there's an old man sitting next to me, and I look to my right, and there's a little girl, and but the funny thing is I recognized her from this life. It was my stepdaughter, but it wasn't the age she was now because at this time she was in high school. This was the age she was when I met her mother when we got married. She was like five, looked like about 4 or 5 year old, and I recognized her. But anyway, with the story goes story through. The farmer didn't like. I apparently because since I obviously wasn't a virgin any longer, they I,
The
they
old person was your husband,
yeah.
and the
Well,
little one was your kid.
I told Dr. Griffith, I don't know if they gave me or sold me this man because anyway, we went to live on a farm where he died real quick, real soon after that. So I took my daughter back to the altar and gave her away. I basically, because I realized how much easier it'd be for me in life not to have a little girl tag along. But I kept telling Dr. Griffith that this is good for her. This is the best thing I could do for her. She'll be happy there. She'll be safe and this kind of thing. But
Okay.
inside, funny, I could feel this terrible, overwhelming sense of guilt because I knew what I was really doing was abandoning my daughter.
So you
And I
felt
just,
the emotion
yeah,
deeply.
I could feel it. I could feel this person felt terrible, terrible guilt. So anyway, we went on this life. Doctor said, "Well, go to your death. Tell me what you see." Well, apparently I'd gone to some place. It was on either ocean or some kind of big sea, and I was involved in fishing. And I could, my death, I could feel my feet, my legs were tagged up in a net, and I was drowning. And for just a second, I could taste salt water. Just for a second, I could taste salt water.
Wow.
Yeah,
Mm.
that was bizarre. But anyway,
Cool.
the funny thing is, Dr. Griffith said, "Okay," said, "now I want you to go into the life you were before your present life. Go to the life you were before you were Bob Snow." So okay. So I was glad to go this life because I still had that terrible, almost like bricks on your chest feeling of guilt for abandoning my daughter.
Yeah.
So anyway, so I was glad to go this life. So anyway, after about 4 or 5 seconds of fog, I realized immediately I'm back in the artist body again. But I'm painting up. But I'm in the middle of painting a portrait right then. But the interesting part was a portrait of a hunchback woman. Now I remember thinking a moment, where in the world could you say? Where in the world could you have got this memory from? I mean, how many hunchback people you ever see that have paintings done? But
Mhm.
anyway, but I could also see
Yeah.
the thing about the regression was so vivid. I could see every brushstroke in the painting, and I could see I was just about done with the painting. And I told Dr. Griffin, I'm painting a portrait. I hate painting portraits. I hate doing them, but I need the money. I could feel this desperate need for money. I could feel this desperate need of money. So we talked about it a while, and she said,
Yeah.
"Okay, go 5 years in the future." So I go 5 years, and I don't know where I'm at, but I'm having this real vigorous argument with somebody that the lighting is not right for one of my paintings. I don't, and I mean that I'd say that the lighting is bad, and I had no idea.
So they don't like your painting. Is that what you said?
No,
They didn't like it?
they liked my painting, but I said the lighting was bad for it. That it wasn't getting the proper lighting
Oh,
where it
you
was.
had an argument about the final lighting on it. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, how it looked. So anyway, then we talked about it. Well, I said, okay, now go to another 5 years. So I went another 5 years, and I'm in a garden, a real small, kind of a small garden, and I could hear piano music coming from my house. So I go walk in the house, and my wife is there, and she's playing the piano. And a bunch of friends are standing around. She's playing the piano. So I described something to her.
Okay.
She said, okay, go to 5 years in the future. So again, I'm going into this gray fog, but before the fog cleared, all of a sudden I started speaking again, and I felt this terrible, terrible sadness on my say, and I felt this grief and sadness. I said, she died of a blood clot. The doctor said she died of a blood clot. Now I had no idea at the moment who I was talking about. Only that whoever this woman was, she was
Okay.
tremendously important to the painter. Well, and before I come to the next scene, the recorder I brought along snapped off. Big click, opened my eyes, and that was it. The regression was over. But now I'm really flustered. I'm really flustered because I had come in here thinking I was so strong willed and nothing would happen.
Mhm.
And what really just flushed me is how vivid the regression was. I could see, feel, smell,
Mhm.
taste, and again I could, like I said in the painting, I could see every single brushstroke. And actually, for a
Mhm.
couple of years after the regression, if I closed my eyes, I could still see things. I could still see the painting and the brushstroke. I could see everything still vividly clear for. Yeah. But anyway, so I'm done, and I'm really flustered. I don't know what to say. And Dr. Rivers says something about
Right.
how does this? You see how this applies to your life now? No, I really couldn't. I just wanted to get out of there because
Yeah.
I didn't know
Yeah. That's
what
kind
the
of
hell just
heavy.
what the hell just happened. I didn't know. So
Yeah.
I made some kind of, I don't know what I even said to her, something foolish about it. I had to think about it and everything. So I got out of there and went and sat in my car. I sat in my car probably a half hour. I'm trying to think what happened. And if I closed my eyes, I could still see the very scenes in the regression.
Mm.
And it really bugged me because they were not because, I didn't think I still thought I'd dreamed them up somehow, but they were so vivid, so clearly vivid. But I finally, after a while, I said, Bob, just forget about it. You were under hypnosis. It was just your subconscious mind bringing up memories, reorder them into stories. And that's all there is to it. You've seen these paintings in this life somewhere. That's the only way they can be that clear. And so you're going to, you're going to see this thing. You're going to experience that sort of thing in hypnosis. So I said, forget about it. Just forget about it.
So let
But you
me
got,
ask you this.
uh-huh.
You had an emotion attached to it, just like especially with the daughter. And then the fact you said you recognized her, so it was your soul on a soul level recognized, I know her. And so that there was an emotion because you said you felt horrible about it.
Yeah,
And there
I
was
felt guilt because I basically took her to the temple where I'd worked and abandoned her. Said, "Here, take her," and I
somebody
left.
take her, right. And so but you felt emotion, and I think that's the thing that people don't understand with past life regression. It's not like you're just looking at visual images through some kind of hypnotic trance, but you're actually there smelling it, feeling it, tasting it, and also feeling the emotion of, I love that person, or I hate what I've done with the lighting on this painting.
Yeah, it's really you can feel whatever this person you're whose body you're inside can feel. So anyway, like I said, I basically told myself, just forget about it, Bob. It's nothing. It's just old memories. Forget about it. But that's easier said than done. And I found
Right.
myself thinking about this constantly. I mean, I think at least 50 times every day, think about it. I close my eyes, I can see it. And it really, I mean, it would have started to bug me. I couldn't stop thinking about it,
Oh,
only because it's
really?
so clear. But I was a police officer for 38 years, and I've seen people who have serious obsessions, and believe me, it seldom turns out real good for the person. So I
Oh,
decided, well,
no.
Bob, I decided, Bob, you know how to get rid of this obsession? Find one that either is a still life painting or find the portrait of Hunchback Woman. I mean, how hard could that be? How many paintings of Hunchback Woman
Okay.
could there be? So I said,
True.
if you find one of these paintings, you'll remember, oh yeah, I saw that 5 years ago someplace. And there's a little blurb about the artist. It's why you
Right.
knew that's why you knew these things. I figured that would solve the case. So I made
Right.
a plan that I would go down to the Indianapolis Public Library and go through the books to find it. Now this happened in pre-internet days, and people don't realize
Right.
in pre-internet days you couldn't pull up a search engine and put
Mm,
portrait hunchback woman. It doesn't work. Now in those days you had to go to the
no.
library and pull books off the shelf, and so
Right.
what I did, I had a plan. I would go there and go through all their art books. I figured how hard would it be to find this painting. Now I made a couple of judgment errors on that. In fact, number one, the library had an awful lot of awful lot of art books, a couple hundred art books. I had no idea they had many art books, and so I went through every single one. It took me over a month. Didn't find either painting. Now that started kind of bugging me. It's just like, wait a minute.
Right.
Like I gotta
Okay.
find it. You gotta find them. So I thought, well, maybe they don't have enough moderate enough of the contemporary books here. I started going to various bookstores, B. Dalton, all these different bookstores, half price books, and Barnes and Noble books, looking at their art books. So maybe I'll find the
Right.
books that I
Right.
didn't have. And that took about another month. I still didn't find one. I still didn't find either painting.
So
So
this was
now
driven
it's
by
starting to bug me.
curiosity. This was all driven by curiosity.
Actually, what this is driven by is I thought this would be easy. I was a detective, and I thought this would be an easy case to solve. It was kind of a challenge to my
Okay.
detective skills. It really was. It was kind
Oh,
of a challenge. Now I ought to be able to solve this thing.
oh my gosh. So you are very competitive because this whole
Yeah.
thing started
No.
as a challenge.
Yeah. Exactly. It was. It was a real challenge to my skills. So next thing I thought, well, I couldn't find it, so I started calling art galleries around Indianapolis and described the paintings to them. But I found out something interesting. This is pre-internet days. In those days, there was no listing of paintings. Now, if you wanted a Renoir or a Van Gogh, you could find that. If you wanted a painting by a less recognized artist, you simply had to know where it was, or you had to just keep calling around until somebody knew where it was. And
Okay.
so I didn't. So again, I couldn't no luck. So I even revisited Dr. Griffith and had another regression. I had wonder, and I asked her to take me to the artist life. I want to find what happened. But interesting enough, now I had several regressions in this, but they were all too far back in history to really validate or not validate. But every time she said, "Want me to get to the artist life," nothing would happen. She'd say specifically, "Go to the life when you're artist," but nothing happened. And
What do
she
you mean
told me
nothing happened?
nothing. I couldn't go there. Nothing would happen. She'd say, "Go to your life as an artist," and nothing would happen.
You
Nothing.
couldn't see
But she
anything.
no, but then she'd go to other lives and they'd be very vivid and but they were again far back in history. And she told me we're done. Said, "Well, you already know everything you need to know." Now, at the time, I didn't think it turned out to be true. At the time, I didn't think it was. But after that, I said, well, maybe I need to know what happened when I went to the regression. Maybe I can understand it better. So I went to a New Age store in Annapolis and bought a couple books on past life regression. And interesting enough, one of the books had a script in the back for self hypnosis. It was kind of like Dr. Griffith's, a lot of imagery, a whole lot of imagery and stuff. So I tried that. Let me tell you something. Self hypnosis is a lot harder than it sounds like. It was real. I tried probably a dozen times, and only twice I could feel myself going into the state that was in Dr. Griffith's office. But then I'd see the number. I'd see the number 1917, and it'd be like, blap, I'm out of it. Twice that happened to me. I'd go in just for a few seconds, and I would see 1917, and that was it. So finally, let me tell you, when I was in charge of homicide branch, we had 83% clearance rate, which is exceptional for a city of our size. But that still means every year 17% of the murderers get away with it. We don't solve 17% of the murders. And so I figured that's what's going to happen here. This is just a case. I run all the evidence to the ground. There's no evidence left I could work on. So I need to just forget about it. Just go on to my life and forget about it. Which sounds good, but I still couldn't. But
But it
there's,
didn't. You were
there's nothing else I could do. I
so were
could.
you haunted by it a little bit?
Oh
Kind of
yeah.
like
Oh
it
yeah.
was like a mystery.
It was just it still bugged me because it seemed like an easy case. But but there's not. I couldn't think of anything else to do. There was no other piece of evidence to go on. So I
What
tried to
about
forget about it.
1917? Isn't that evidence? Isn't that a
Of
year?
what? I didn't know it was a year. All I knew was a number. I know it was an address, amount of money, or a
Mm.
year, or what it was. So I decided to forget about it. Just forget about it and go on my life. So a couple months later, it's getting toward April. My wife and I, our anniversary is in April. We decided that year to go somewhere neither of us had ever been. So she called me at work one day and says, "What do you think about New Orleans?" I thought, "That sounds like fun. We neither of us ever been to New Orleans. Sound like fun." So we decided to go for our anniversary in New Orleans. So we spent some time in New Orleans, and my wife besides being I told you a child abuse tech, she's a real history buff. Now, you can't throw a rock in New Orleans. I hit something of historical value. I mean, we visited the battlefield of 1812. We went to countless plantations and things like that. But
Right.
at nighttime, we'd go down the French Quarter and have some drinks, listen to the bands and everything. But I also noticed as we going down the French Quarter, there are a lot of really neat stores there,
Yeah.
memorabilia stores, antique stores, various things like that,
Right.
that were always closed because we were going down late in the evening. So our last day there, our plane didn't leave till the evening. So I said, "Hey, why don't we spend the afternoon window shopping in the French Quarter?" And she
Oh,
said,
yeah,
"Yeah,
it's
that's a good
fascinating.
idea." Yeah, it
Yeah.
was fun. We went through all kinds of just beautiful antique
Oh,
stores.
they have some gorgeous art pieces
Art,
there.
yeah,
Yeah.
well, that's what happened. The very last, we went through memorabilia stores. Now, the last we got to Royal Street. Now, at this time in New Orleans, Royal Street was all art galleries. So we started looking through them. They had some beautiful pieces there. You know, the art galleries had some beautiful pieces, way above my pay grade, that's for sure. No way I can afford these things. But anyway, we're walking down the street, going to art gallery and art gallery. We finally get down to our store at the very end of the street. It's a small 2-story building. We walk in, and there's a sign that says modern art upstairs. Now, my wife is a fan of modern art. I've never been. I don't know why, but I never thought it was real art. But anyway, so she goes upstairs. I'm walking along the floor in the first floor building. I'm looking at their paintings, but I didn't recognize any of the paintings or recognize any of the artists. And I'm walking along. I get to the corner. And there's the easels. There's a portrait sitting on the easel in the corner. So I walk by and just glance at it, and I stop like I've been hit a brick wall. I turn around. It's the portrait of the hunchback woman.
The Hunchback
Now,
Lady.
let me tell you something. 38 years in the police department, I had a lot of really frightening, scary situations. I was in a number of them. But the difference being, when you police work, you have experience and training and know what
Yeah.
to do. In this
Right.
case, I didn't know what to do. I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, no, no,
Right.
no, 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 no. This
No,
doesn't happen. This doesn't happen in real life. It happens in movies and TV.
it
This
does
does not
happen in
happen.
movies.
It doesn't happen.
Yeah.
And I tell myself, first I don't say, Bob, this looks like a painting. It's not it. It's just close to it. But I closed my eyes, and at that time, I could still see the brushstrokes, and it was the same painting. So now I'm thinking, I wonder if I'm not here. I wonder if I'm in a hospital or a nursing home with tubes and wires running on me, and I'm just imagining I'm here. I mean, I was desperate. I mean,
Well, yeah.
I'm desperate looking for some kind of rational explanation. I mean, what's the odds of hunting for months for a painting like this and not finding it, just stumbled onto by accident in New Orleans? Come on. I mean, what's the odds? I mean, I didn't know what to, I stood there for probably 4 minutes. I had no idea. I don't think I've ever been that scared in my life simply because I didn't know what was going on. And I thought, Bob, you're something really here. You maybe, again, I was still working on the idea. Maybe I wasn't really there. This is just hallucination I'm actually somewhere else. And like I said, in the
You
hospital
were
bed.
that shocked at it. You were shocked at a present time, it
Well,
sounds
I
like.
had, I
Did
had
you
no explanation for it. None.
did
So,
did you see the signature on it?
no, that was the point. I didn't see a signature. So well, I've been sitting there long enough. Salesman Morse says, he said, "I bet you're thinking how nice to look over your fireplace, aren't you?" I'm thinking, yeah, a hunchback woman, I don't know about my fireplace. And I know the price, I think the price was $5,000. But
Okay.
in those days, I mean, let me tell you something about buying paintings. Buying paintings is like buying a used car. The price on the window is not what you usually pay, and the price on it you can bargain it down. But again, I didn't want to buy it, I think, but I wanted some information on it. I says, "I don't recognize the artist. Who painted this?" He said, "Well, hang on a second, I got a little bio on him." So he took me over this desk, and he pulled this little bio, and it said their painter was a J. Carroll Beckwith. and I'd never heard of J. Carroll Beckwith, but he said, here, read a little biography of him. The bizarre thing, I read the biography is maybe half a paragraph type thing, not very long, but I found five confirmations of things I'd seen in the regression. For example,
Okay.
that there was number one, there was actually a painting of the Hunchback Woman. There
Right.
was
The
one.
one you saw.
And honestly, interesting enough, that the artist turned out he was born in 1852. He died in 1917.
Okay.
And I thought about that for a minute. And never, interesting enough, he lived during a time period. I saw him. He lived in the 1800, early 1900s. And also, Dr. Griffith asked me when I talked about talking about going to the house and my wife playing piano, she'd ask me, "Where are you at?" And I'd answer, I said, "We're in France." I had no idea how I knew that. But anyway, I noticed that according to this, he had spent some time in France and that he had won a number of awards for his painting. And I remember being at a party where people congratulated me for something. I couldn't remember what it
Got
was.
it.
But anyway, but I'm thinking to myself, this is nothing, Bob. You could guess this about anybody. This is nothing. But now I knew. Now I could reopen this case because I had more information. I could go back to Indianapolis. I could find out where I'd seen these paintings at in this life. And that'd be it. Then I realized it's all just, just now the finding the painting. I was still trying to rationalize that. But I'm thinking to myself, the odds of winning the Powerball lottery are about 250 million to one. But somebody does. And I think the odds of me finding this painting
True.
are about 250 million to one. But things like this happen. I'm trying to rationalize
Right.
myself. So anyway, I go back to Annapolis and I go down to the public library and they didn't have hardly anything. Beckwith was not a terribly successful painter. He never painted any kind of masterpiece paintings that you'd recognize or know about. He made most of his living during his life painting portraits, it turns out, because he knew, that's the one thing he'd make any money on.
Making
But they
money.
had
Yeah.
very low information at the public library. She said, so the late librarian said, "So why don't you go up to the art museum? There's an art museum in north side of Annapolis. They have a very extensive art library." So I said,
Okay.
okay. So I thought, good idea. So I went up there and I told the lady I was researching J. Carroll Beckwith. And so she went and found me some information on him. But the bad thing is, I found five more confirmations of what I'd seen during the regression.
Oh, really? What?
I found that Beckwith had died. I said that when I was flying through the woods, it looked like fall. When after I
Yeah.
died,
The dew on the trees. The leaves were
the
falling.
leaves
Yeah.
were free. And I found he died in October. And I
Okay.
also said when I come out of the building that I was over a large city. I could see lights in the horizon. We died in New York City. And
Okay.
also, it said that Beckwith painted portraits, but didn't like doing it, but he needed the money. And I remember saying that to Dr. Griffith that I didn't like painting portraits. And also said that his portraits were often full of bright color and sun. I remembered the still life or the fireplace was full of bright color and had a big sun in it. But again, I'm thinking, oh, not Bob, don't jump to conclusions. This is just lucky guesses, or maybe this would be true about all artists. But anyway, the librarian said, "By the way, I have a folder on an exhibition of his work that was held here in Indianapolis." Boy, for a moment, it's like ice water washing through me. I felt so good. I'd figured it out. There was an exhibition here. I'd seen the paintings. I'd read a little bit about the artist. Unfortunately, the exhibition was in 1911. I told you,
Oh.
I told the librarian, "Is there anything more recent?" She said, "No." She says, "He wasn't that famous. He wasn't that good. This was done when he was alive.
Mm.
After he died, nobody cared." But interesting enough,
Oh.
on some of the stuff she got me, the information on Beckwith she got me, I noticed one of them said that this information come from the diaries of J. Carroll Beckwith, which are on file at the National Academy of Design in New York City. So I knew right then what I had to do.
Go to New York City.
Yeah,
Honey, we need another
no,
trip.
I called them and asked if I could see the diaries. Well, I'm not going to run there first
Okay.
and see. But anyway, they said, no. He said, "I'm sorry, they're much too fragile. We don't allow anybody to handle them." She said, however, they have been converted to microfilm that you can get on library loan through the Archives of American Art, the Smithsonian. And so I
Okay.
thought, well, I knew what I had to do. So I went back to the little public library and ordered the microfilm. I thought, well, I got to look at this.
Right.
Maybe this will give me some answers, some kind of answers. But she said it'd be about 2 weeks. I said, okay. So I went back home and listened to the tape again. I wrote down everything I had said that could have confirmed or not confirmed. And I found I had 28 things that it could be confirmed or not confirmed from my tape. Unfortunately, I'd already confirmed the first 10. But again, I'm thinking to myself, these are lucky guesses about about an artist, probably true about all artists. So anyway, 2 weeks, the librarian called me and said, your microfilm's here. So I rushed down to the library, let's say, and I was kind of taken back when I found out there were 9 spools, 17,000 pages. Beckwith started his diary when he was 19 and made his last entry the night before he died at 65. He was a very avid diary keeper. He got
Good
I got
God.
17,000 pages. So now what do you do? But I also found out
He
that
was a writer.
he loved to, but he had kept he'd written he in the 1917 in spring of that year he had moved to Santa Barbara, California. He was in poor health, and he started an autobiography of himself. They had that included, the hot dog. I'll look at that. But I found out he didn't have he started in 1970. He only got up to age 21 before he died. So there was really not much value to him. But also for some reason, somebody had taken certain pages out of his diary and typed them. I'm not sure why. So I read these, and again, all I found was more confirmations. I told you when I seen him at the very first patient, he went to a sidewalk cafe with a woman, and she'd order some
Yeah.
or what he
Yeah.
ordered wine. And
He was meeting a woman. Yeah.
I thought this is what I'm looking for now. Now I'm kind of concerned because I've done confirmed. I'm looking for the denying factor. I'm looking to find one thing that's completely wrong. If you find something that's completely wrong, for example, if he's a teetotaler or didn't drink wine, because I always thought these days men drink whiskey, men who drink whiskey.
Yeah, right.
I thought, well, maybe they'll disprove it type thing. I was looking for that one distributing factor because once I found something, like I said we couldn't have children because my wife couldn't have children. If he had 3 kids, this is not true. This is some kind of jumbled fact, but it's not a true regression.
Right. You were looking for something that
would
say this out.
Yeah. But anyway, in his diary, he had attended art school in Paris for 5 years, and during the breaks one time, he said he went to Venice. He said he lived on burnt eggs and wine. There's another little thing I thought. Also found that they exerted apart from diary, they didn't have any children. He talked about how he wished he could have had children, but didn't have any children. God. So anyway, now I'm really confused because I have confirmed quite a few of these things. I hadn't found that one denying factor. So let me tell you something. When I was the commander of the homicide branch, one of my biggest admonishments to all my detectives were: do not get personally involved in your cases. If you get personally involved in your cases, you lose sight of it. You lose all peripheral vision. You're directed toward a thing. Do not get personally involved. Now I knew in this case I was really personally involved. I needed outside eyes on this. I needed somebody who had no connection to it to look at it. So I told my wife what I was doing. She didn't know until this time what I was doing.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, did she know anything? Did she
know
she
she didn't.
Part of this whole New Orleans thing too?
So I didn't tell her anything because I was still flabbergasted. And I felt sure I could go back to Indianapolis, look up Carroll Beckwith, and realize, oh yeah, I saw that 4 years ago. That's where I saw that paying at, and then it's all explained. But so I told her, she thought I was nuts. Basically, she thought I was nuts. And I said, well, no, wait a minute, hang on. I said, look at my evidence. So I had her look at everything I did. She said, Bob, you read a book, you read it, see the movie about him. That's all there is to it. She said, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll look into him and I'll find the stuff you missed. And actually, to tell you the truth, this is kind of what I was hoping for. I really was, because she was an excellent detective. She really was.
You thought that your life could go back to the way it was. She put your mind at ease.
Yeah, exactly. I thought she would find this thing I had missed, because I got so personally involved, maybe I couldn't see it. Type thing.
Okay.
But turned out after about a month, she couldn't find anything more than I found. She said she couldn't find anything. But she told me, okay, Bob, said, maybe you discovered something really important, or maybe this. Keep your mouth shut. She says, police captains don't go talk about this sort of thing. Police work's a very conservative profession, and it's a very old school profession. And police captains don't go talking about past lives. They just don't. And she told me, Bob, keep your mouth shut. Just okay, go on. At the time I thought, you know what? She's right. So I sent the microphone back, and I thought, well, I just go on my life. But after that, I had a couple of experiences with the police officers where they told me about having paranormal experiences. I had two different police officers who I consider very reliable people talk about having out-of-body experiences. So I started doing a little discreet inquiry on the police department. I found that, interesting enough, police officers have quite a number of paranormal experiences. I think it's a stress of the job. I had a number of people who had out-of-body experiences. I had one case where the officer talked about they had a house where things were moving on their own in the house, and they had to eventually call a Catholic priest to come over and do an exorcism in the house.
Oh, sure. That sounds horrible.
But again, this got no publicity because the officer said that people begged them, please don't talk about this to anyone because we'll have every nut in the world camped on our front lawn.
Yeah, that's probably true.
And the officers felt pretty good about that because they didn't want to talk about it because they afraid everybody think they were nuts. So but I've read enough of these cases. I said, wait a minute. This is not as unusual as I think. Might be my case not as unusual as I think. They're willing to talk about it when they ought to. So I reordered the diaries and made hard copy of them. because you no way you only had you're down at the library. You got 2 weeks in a microfilm reader. There's no way you could get the work done and everything. So had hard copy made of it, and I took a year to read it. It took over a year to read the whole diary.
Are you serious?
Yes,
Wow.
I had to have a magnifying glass, and and because but interesting enough, Beckwith used pencil a lot of times, and he scribbled. One time in his diary, he's writing. I tried to read last year's entry, and I couldn't read my own writing. I knew exactly how he felt, so it took me over a year.
Do you have a copy that
Oh
of
yeah,
his writing?
oh yeah.
Okay, that we can see.
I have
Okay.
a complete copy of every page of his diary.
Oh,
Yes,
oh,
I
oh,
do. Yeah,
wow.
and
Could
what
you understand it? Could
I
you understand
oh
it?
yeah, yeah, yeah. The problem about a diary though is you add maybe 4 or 5 sentences about some event that happened, but you know what it is, so you don't have to give a lot of details because you'll remember it if you're in your diary. But the person reading your diary has no idea what you're talking about because he
Mm.
mentioned something that sounds really tantalizing, but he just mentioned a sentence two of it and let it go. It's like, But
So you
anyway,
don't know what he's thinking. Okay.
I read it, and this time at this time I'd already written several books, and I realized this might be a good subject for a book. So I thought, what I need to do first off, I need to get at least a picture of the Hunchback woman, get a photograph of her or something, and because otherwise, who's going to believe you if you say I got it? Yeah, but you don't have to show us the Hunchback woman. So I went back to New Orleans. I didn't want to really buy the painting. I would if I had to, I suppose. But I thought maybe I could use a picture of it. So I went back to the gallery, but the gallery was closed. It had gone out of business. So I started doing what police do. I started canvassing the area of other galleries around the area, and I finally found the gallery that had purchased the inventory of this gallery. And I described the painting to him. He said, "Oh yeah, I remember that one." I said, "Well, I'd like to just I don't want to buy it or take it." He said, "I've already sold it." Yeah, I said, "Well, I don't want." I said, "Well, I don't want to put anything. If I could just get a photograph of it." He said, "But so what he did, he gave me a little 3x5 piece of card. It had my name, address, phone number, everything else. He said, fill this out. I'll send it to the people. If they want to contact it, they will." There's an interesting thing you find out. Our galleries pretty well want to keep the identity of their clients kind of secret, simply because one, they don't want other galleries to know these people are buying
That's
expensive
true.
artwork.
Mhm.
And number two, you don't want to let people know this person has a lot of expensive, bad people know this person has a lot of expensive artwork in their
Mhm.
house. So
Yeah.
he basically said, all I can do, I'll send it to him. I never heard from him. Never heard from him. I don't know what, never heard from him. But anyway, I decided, well, I got, I'm going to have to read, read the whole diary and everything. And I started reading I started reading the diary. Interesting enough, I kept looking for that one piece that would show me how it was, there's all wrong. But I didn't.
Right.
I kept finding confirmation after confirmation. For example, I said that we didn't have children. My wife couldn't have children. Well, on October 24th, 1888, which is interesting, coincidentally, 29 years to the day before Beckwith died, his wife had a very difficult miscarriage, and after that couldn't have children. I thought,
I see.
and
Wow.
And I also wondered, I seen her playing piano. I thought, maybe, did she play the piano? Would she play the piano? Sure enough, in the diary, he talked about his wife playing a piano quite a bit. They had one there. Okay. And he got to one point where he was in his diary, he was describing this new gallery. He was in his diary, this new gallery, new paint, where he was going, this new studio he's going to have. And he described it as having the ceiling was all skylights and the right wall was all windows, exactly the same as I had described it in my book. And when I described him to start with, Dr. Griffith asked me to look down and describe myself when I first seen him on the city street.
Yeah.
I had told her I have a cane. I said, but I'm not because I'm old or crippled. It's a fancy walking cane. And sure
Yeah.
enough, a half dozen times in his diary,
Gentleman had that.
he mentioned having it. And also he
Mhm.
mentioned quite often in his diary about drinking wine. He had a real taste for wine. He said people
Right.
did find it unusual that a man would love wine so much, but he said that he developed that taste for living in France for 5 years.
Oh,
Well, that's the
yeah.
problem. I kept finding one thing after another. And I kept thinking, maybe you're not going to find it. So when I got to December 5th, 1886, his mother was in church. And I had said at the very last of my regression, when I was in the fog, I had said, she died of a blood clot. The doctor said she died of a blood clot. And I knew it was some woman who was really important, the
Okay.
painter. And I knew it had, and then after reading the diary, I knew it had to be one or two people. Either his wife, who he loved dearly, or his
Yeah.
mother. When he told his dad he wanted to be an artist, his dad was a wholesale grocer, and they were pretty well off, lived in Chicago. And his dad said he didn't know a better way of starving to death than being an artist. He really tried to discourage Beckwith from being an artist. But his mother was very
Yeah.
supportive. very supportive,
Okay.
and bought him his first easel and paints, and always and encouraged him, and talked her husband, letting him go to France for 5 years
Oh,
to
bless her.
study.
Okay.
But anyway, on December 5th, '86, the mother was in church and died of a stroke caused by a blood clot. Now, you can guess a lot of things about a person's life. You can guess and be right a lot of things. You're not going to guess what their mother died of. What's the odds of being come with a blood clot? If somebody important in your life to have blood clot, your mother
Could
died of
be
a blood
anything. People die
clot.
of a ton of
I
things.
think I think that was the one that finally pushed me over. Then I'm realizing, no, Bob,
You
this
re
is
did you feel it, like, in your chest, like,
yeah.
"Oh,
When I
crap,
read that,
this is,
I
like,
can
so real."
I can feel again. You can feel your heart just about sink in your chest when you read that because you realize this is real.
This is
This is
real.
not something you made up. This is a real one. And I ended up proving all 28. Didn't find one single thing that was wrong. I proved all 28 of them.
So let me ask you this, Robert, when you're reading through his diary, did it ever just open up 3D for you and you actually kind of saw it? Did you feel any emotion when you're reading it? Did it feel personal ever?
No, and that's the interesting part. And it really didn't that
Okay.
much. But the only
Okay.
thing that really grabbed me, of course, the blood clot. The blood clot, because I'm hoping for that one factor is not true. But I'm pretty sure, almost pretty sure by then you're not going to find it. But when I found that one, I'm sorry, there's no way you could just make this all imagine this and get 28
Mhm.
guesses straight. You couldn't make 28 correct guesses about something. You could make a dozen guesses and get 4 or 5 of them right. You're not going to get 28 guesses right. Come on,
All right.
that's not going to happen. So I
With the
basically had to
right.
you have to accept this was actually a vision of his past of his life.
Right. Which is you. And that's
Yeah, oh, yeah. Let me tell you
it's
something. That
you.
was the hardest part to accept. The fact that the diary was true, the regression is true. I can accept that. The hard part to accept is what it means to your life now. In other words, you have to
Yeah.
realize that everything you believed in is wrong. That all the people you thought were weirdos
Mhm.
and strange people, weirdly
You're
strange and weirdos were right, and you were wrong. That this is not the way you think doesn't the world doesn't work the way you think. It works in a whole different way. And that was the hard part for me to accept that.
How much longer? Because here you are in this very analytical world where it's kind of hush hush, like it's proper. Uh, how, I mean, you kind of had to hide this awareness, didn't you? And who you were. I mean, right? I mean, how did you go on with your life? Because
Well,
everything's changed. The game's
yeah.
changed.
Again, it took me a while. It wasn't something that happened overnight. It really wasn't. It's really hard to accept. I mean, you live in all these years, like all these years with this one idea about how the universe worked, and you realize you're wrong. It doesn't work that way. It worked a completely different way than you thought. So that was. It took me a while to really accept that, to really think, boy, I've been wrong all these years, and maybe other people were right and I was wrong.
Well, what about the lady that initially got you going at the party that this whole thing was a challenge? Did she, I mean, obviously she knows all this. Did
Yeah.
you ever have a conversation as a summary, a wrap up with all
Oh
this?
yeah, yeah. We talked about it a number of times. Yes, we had talked about it a number of times. Yeah. If I know, Kathy is still doing psychology. Is still doing the work as a
Okay.
She's retired from the police department now, but I think she's still working as a psychologist.
Helping people in this way.
Yes,
So,
yes.
so now, I mean, I mean, it must have been kind of shook you up, but at some point, didn't you find it magical? Like, this is cool. We live forever.
Well, I don't know. I mean, yeah, I found it was more as upsetting simply because
Initially,
it's
yeah.
really upsetting because you now have to change your whole worldview. You have to
Yeah.
change. I mean,
Yeah.
things
Yeah.
aren't, and actually, in a way, this worldview is a lot fairer than my older worldview because in the
Yeah.
Judeo-Christian worldview, you get one shot, and you always think, okay,
That's it.
why would somebody be born disabled or born with all kind of problems? Does God not like this person? Where other people
Right.
they have a life, live a nice, good life.
Privilege.
They have a privileged life and live it good and die.
Right.
I mean, Beckwith himself lived a kind of a privileged life. He whined and cried in his diary about not having any money. He was pretty well off. They had a summer home in the Catskills. They went to France. They go there every summer, and every other summer they spend their time in Europe all summer. They lived a pretty good life. He whined and cried about not God. He was terrible about that. Whined and cried about not having money, but he was actually pretty well off.
Okay. So between probably his dad and his wife's parents and what he made, they probably did okay.
Yeah, but my point being is the Judeo-Christian point of view. Why do some people have bad lives and other people have good?
Right.
Because you always wonder now, you got two babies getting ready to be born. One of them's going to a crack addict, and one of them's going to an upper middle class home. How does God
Mhm.
decide which soul gets which? Does he not like the soul he gives to the crack addict, Or does he really like the soul he's getting in the middle class if you only believe in one life? Whereas reincarnation, it makes sense. Everybody has your time as Donald Trump, and everybody has your time as untouchable in Calcutta. I mean, you have
Mhm.
experienced all different kind of lives during your history, so it's really fair. I mean, you might think this life is really cruddy, but the next life could be a really nice, easy life too. It's just it's your turn for a cruddy life. Your turn next time for a nice life. So, to me, reincarnation is much fairer. And because in homicide, sometimes you go on a murder of a young child. I've had babies murdered and three and four toddlers. It's just awful, awful. That's funny. All the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of murder scenes I went to, the only ones I remember are the children. I remember
Oh,
real
yeah.
clear. I remember every one of those. And
Oh, yeah.
you think, where's the fairness in this? If you only get one life,
Right.
where's the fairness of a toddler is murdered?
Mhm.
But if you look at it in the view of reincarnation, you think, well, it's just one life, and you might have served it to help another person get through something they're supposed to experience in this life, and you had to die in this life to let them to help them out. But you're going to have hundreds of other lives, so it's not like it's a big you got cheated out of anything. You simply have moved on to the next one. So
Right.
to me, reincarnation is a much fairer view of life than the other than my one I held previously. Certainly.
Well, so, gosh, I got so many questions for you. This is just so fascinating. Now, did you, I know it must have been upsetting at first and you're trying to put your life back in order, but at some point, did you come to peace with, oh, this is just one of the lives that I had?
Oh
This
yeah.
life goes on at some point. Okay.
It
And did
takes
you
it takes
ever,
it takes a while. It does take a while. It's not something you do instantaneously. But yeah, I'm very much at peace with what I found out. Now, the police department did not take it as well.
oh, they found out.
Oh yeah. Oh well, in my book come out. Yeah,
Oh,
my book come out.
okay.
Everybody found out.
Okay, so you did the first book, I guess it's the
Yeah.
one that I've got, and then you did the second one. So you were still in the police
Oh, yeah. I
department.
was still in charge of
Oh
homicide. I
boy.
was in charge of homicide when that came out,
Oh boy.
and
So they
it did
must have thought what you thought of people before you went through this awareness.
It did not go
Wow.
well. It did not go well, no. Again,
Okay.
this is one of their captains, and again, you're the backbone of the police department. In Indianapolis, I think when I was a captain, there were only 22 captains. There was like 1,200, 1,300 officers. Only 22 captains. You're kind of the backbone of the department, and so this did not go well. The chief and the command staff did not like this. They really didn't.
What happened? I'm curious.
Eventually, even though, interesting enough, when I took over homicide, I took it over in 1999. We had reached the maximum the record for murders. We had an all-time record the year before. So being a head of homicide is like being head of a football team. If you have a bad season, they don't fire the players. Who they fire? They fire the coach. Well, the same way at homicide, if you have a really bad year, they fire the
Oh,
head. They brought me in, and I was there for 6 years. For every
wow.
year, the homicide rate went down and our clearance went up. But but even, the matter of fact, when they moved me out of there, we were at the lowest murder rate in the years, and the clearance rate was 83%. But they moved me out. They sent me to a place called the Citizen Service Desk. This is the place where people come in to get fingerprinted, to look up police reports. It's a place they put captains just before they retire. And if you notify them you're going to retire and so what, they put you in a place like this. Well, they put me there, and that was the message I was supposed to get. It was time to retire.
Okay.
It did not go well. No, and the bad thing is my wife had warned me, and I knew that probably is true. But
Hmm.
this book seemed much too important to me that I
Yes,
could not
very.
publish it because, interesting enough, while I was writing it, a lot of times information about Beckwith just kind of fall in my lap. Well, I was talking to it. A matter of fact, I was during his reading his diary. He'd mentioned all the number of times that he worked on his scrapbooks at night. They'd work on. But I had no idea where. I couldn't find where his scrapbooks were at.
Scrapbook.
I was
Okay.
talking to an art gallery, and the art gallery owner put me in contact with a woman he worked with, who authenticated American art. Apparently, there's a lot of forgery in American art, and she knew about Beckwith. So we talked for a minute about Beckwith, and she just out of the blue, she said, "You know where his scrapbooks are at the New York Historical Society, don't you?" I hadn't asked her about it. I hadn't mentioned it, anything. She just come out of the blue. So actually, I had to go to New York to look at them, and there was really nothing in there but more confirmation. For example, there was a photograph of his wife playing a piano and this kind of thing. But interesting enough, information like that kept getting dumped in my lap. Stuff I wouldn't expect would just come out of nowhere. A lot of people ask me though, if
Yeah.
Becca was just a mediocre painter who never really painted anything important, why would he keep his diaries? I mean,
Yeah.
why would it important? And it's really, and that's a very good question, very valid question. The reason he kept his diaries is Beckworth was a social butterfly. The man, he got around society a lot, and he knew a lot of famous people. he was like he was good friends with Theodore Roosevelt. He knew
Mm.
Mark Twain and him were neighbors up in the Catskills, and they both had summer.
Oh, okay. So he did okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
he knew
He was
Sarah
poor mouth.
Bernhardt.
All right.
He knew Claude Monet. Uh,
Re-
Oscar Wilde, the British side.
Really?
Yeah, when he came to America, he stayed with Beckwith. He stayed in Beckwith's apartment with him when he
You're
came to
kidding. Well,
America.
he was
So
like in the brat pack of the day.
right, he knew everyone. That's why they keep him, because there's all kind of little anecdotes in his diaries about these people. Matter of fact, after my book was written, a woman called me who's writing a biography of Mark Twain. And she said, I know what's in his diaries, but there's 17,000 pages. Said,
Um,
do you have any information about any of Mark Twain? Fortunately, when I'd made I had little yellow stickum things, and I annotated every page of
yeah.
what was on it. And I was able to find her a little anecdote about Mark Twain and Beckwith for a book. And that's basically why they kept diaries, not because he was anyone, but he knew everyone. Everybody who was famous, he knew them.
Well, he sounds like that he was a personality, and I want to ask you what you gathered about his personality. But he sounded like, kind of, I say needy, but a little bit of a drama king, but that he was a big personality. That's what it sounds like to me.
He
And that
basically, he basically, if you read his diary, almost every night he'd go out to an opera, to a play, to a dinner, to
social
something like it.
butterfly.
He would go out socially quite a bit. He really did. And during his time, he met all these famous people. I mean, and he'd write about him in his diary about, Mark Twain. Of course, he called him Samuel Clemens then, because he was a neighbor of his up in the Catskills. Said Samuel Clemens come over to our porch last night and told all kind of funny stories type thing. And it's these little anecdotes he has about people that make his diaries valuable. And if you want to find something about Oscar Wilde was, I don't know how long he was in America, but he stayed with Beckwith in his apartment. I mean, he knew
Wow.
Sarah Bernhardt, the actress. He knew, like I said, him
Yeah.
and Theodore Roosevelt. Theodore Roosevelt was the commissioner of police at this time in New York City, and they used to go to lunch together. This type of thing. So,
Wow.
if you want a anecdote about Theodore Roosevelt, you probably need to look at the Beckwith diaries. He'd have about him.
This is fascinating because this is like behind the scenes of what really, which makes it more authentic of that time period. But he had to think about it. He had to get in with the social status to be able to get the big dollars for the portraits.
Yeah, but
Right?
he never made big money. The most he ever made
He
for a
didn't.
portrait was $1,000. Now, back in the 1880s and 90s, that was a
That,
lot of money.
that was a
But
lot then.
he was roommates in Paris for 5 years with John Singer Sargent. John Singer Sargent, probably next to Charles Whistler, is the most famous American painter of all. He,
Wow.
at the same time, he was getting $25,000 a portrait. They had people waiting in line. And Beckwith,
25,000?
yeah,
Oh my
he was
God.
he was good friends with the painter William Chase. William Chase was getting 8 or 9,000. He was the most he ever made with 1,000. He simply wasn't that good. I mean, he could paint you a competent portrait, okay, but there's not life to his portraits like most people have. He couldn't demand the money that Sargent or Chase or other people demanded. He simply like I said, most he ever got was $1,000. And he was pretty happy about that, because $1,000 is about a person's yearly income back in those days. So, but the interesting part about him, he whined constantly about having money. But
Yeah.
he had an uncle die back in the 1880s, left him $10,000. Now in the 1880s, $10,000 was a lot of money.
Yes. Right.
That was a huge amount of money. But he wasn't happy. He thought that he got cheated, that he should have got more. And he never was happy. But that's what he built the house in the Catskills with, at that $10,000. But he wasn't even happy when he got to $10,000. He had, to me, one of the lessons of his life is he was too stuck on money, on having money. The problem was, again, most of his friends, like I said, him and John Singer Sargent were friends their whole lives. They were friends. Matter of fact, when he died, it upset. They said it upset Sargent tremendously, because Beckwith was his best friend. But all of his friends were making all this money, and he wasn't. And it really bugged him. In his diary, you can tell it really bugged him. Everybody he knew, all the painters he knew, were making more money than he was.
So so he didn't charge more because either was he not good at business, or you just don't think he was at the level they were.
Yeah, he couldn't get that. He couldn't charge
Okay.
that. Well, they wouldn't pay it. They go to another artist. I mean, if you go
Okay.
to him, you go to him for $750, $800, you could get a good portrait of yourself. As a competent, it looked like it was a good competent, but there was no vitality of life to it, like
Mhm.
Sargent or William Chase, somebody else had put into him. That was the problem.
And maybe that was his frustration. So, what do you think that he learned during his life as an
Well,
artist?
well, he
Or is it
certainly
was just Is
Well,
what?
he should have learned that money is not that important. Because actually, at the end of his life, and funny, at the end of his diary, every year he put an accounting of where he was money wise. He was actually pretty well off. He really was, but he said couldn't seem to get enough, and that kind of ruined his life. Because again, every third or fourth page of his diary, all 17,000 pages, every third or fourth page is him whining about not having enough money, not having enough work, not painting enough portraits and all. But
Okay.
that and number two, he was at a time in artwork when things were changing. John Singer Sargent was good friends with Claude Monet, the father of Impressionism, and
Yeah. Amazing.
he took Beckwith to meet with Claude Monet. Beckwith thought his work was trash. He
Are you
really did.
serious?
No, yeah, Beckwith
He
believed
didn't
that
like Monet's work, or
no,
oh my
he
God.
thought Monet's work was trash because he believed in realistic art. He had been schooled and brought up that you draw paintings like they look, not this little dots and stuff. So
Right.
he really did. But see, that's the problem. When he was during his life, Impressionism come, modern art, Cubism, all these
Yeah.
different painting come in, and
Right.
he simply would not believe in any of them. He thought they were all wrong and all, and unfortunately, he got washed away in the wave because everybody else would accept him but him. He
That
simply
makes
would not
sense.
accept it.
So it's really about change, and the money is, it could be anything. It's about being fixated on a particular idea, and then he was not able to change with things, which is, that could be said about us today.
Yeah, he would not accept change, not in art. He certainly wouldn't. He was stuck in his way of doing art. He thought that's the way art should be, and he really rejected any other kind of art other than the realistic art he was trained to do.
Wow. So what do you feel that he learned from that?
I would hope he learned that number one, craving money so much it made him unhappy. And he should have been happy. He should have been very happy because
Yeah.
I mean he led a really good life. I mean
Yeah.
he was never hurting and never starving and never had money. He actually did pretty well in his life. He lived really well, but he was fixated on money. I think
Or
that
the
was just
lack of,
or
or
the
the
lack
lack
of,
of.
and I think that kind of that was over one of the overbearing. It's just you read it over and over and over and
Sad.
over in his diary. You realize this is silly because you're ruining your life worrying about money. You want more and more, and it's not that important to being happy.
Well, a lot of people are like that, Robert.
Yeah, they
They
sure are.
are.
Yeah,
I
yeah, I
mean,
know that.
and they're fixated. I don't have this. I don't have. Oh, look at this over here. Look at this person. They just brought a brand new car and blah blah blah. And I'm still driving the one from 12 years ago, or you were whatever. You know what I'm saying? So it's, of course, it's not about that. It's never about the money.
No, it's not, and it shouldn't have been for him because he led a pretty good life. I mean, he really led a pretty good life. He didn't have any big problems, real troubles in his life. He really didn't. And again, he had. I mean, if you can afford to build a summer home in the Catskills, be a neighbors with Mark Twain. If you can go to France
Mhm.
spend the summer in Europe every other year,
You got some money.
you're not really that bad off. But you would have thought reading his diary, you'd have thought he was just almost a beggar of the street.
Well, and that's the same thing as if, we had friends that were extremely wealthy that we're around, we would look like a pauper. And maybe
Mhm.
that's what it was. Because the friends that he kept. So he must have been entertaining to have so many friends. Think
Yeah.
about it. And a social butterfly. He must have been interesting to be around and fun. What was his wife like? Did he ever indicate what she was like?
Yeah, yeah. Well, as a matter of fact, at the very last of his life, by the way, talking about some of my research, I was reading a thing in what we called Who Was Who in American Art. And it
Mhm.
said Beckwith say died of suicide. I thought, wait a minute, I didn't experience any of that.
Mm-mm.
So I called the chief medical examiner in New York City. Now I told him who I was, commander of the homicide branch and everything, and asked him if he could look up a cause of death for me. And there's enough. He didn't question. I told him it was died in 1970. He didn't ask why. I was surprised at that, but I think it's because of who I was, type thing. So he wrote back, and Beckwith actually died of endocarditis, which was it's a disease of the heart valves.
Hurt.
And if you
Yeah,
actually read his
hurt.
diary, you can see the symptoms several years before he died. But
Oh,
yeah,
really?
yeah, you can see
What
because
was it?
fatigue. You had fatigue, and he was throwing up. He was throwing out. He was spitting up blood quite a bit. And he was also
Oh,
fatigued all the time. As a matter of fact, at the last life, he was so fatigued he couldn't stand up to paint. And so
oh,
he
darn.
stopped, and actually, the last, maybe 3 or 4 years of his life, he didn't go out anymore. He was not the social butterfly. He wanted to stay at home. And his wife, Bertha, she wanted to go out. She was always talking about how, she enjoyed it because she went with him in all these places, and she was still wanting to do it. But of course, he couldn't because he was really got really very sick. Matter of fact, when he died, he was taking a walk in Central Park and had a heart attack caused by the endocarditis, and got a taxi, got back to his apartment, and got upstairs and died in his wife's arms. Which is,
Oh, wow.
I suppose that's romantic in a way, but I don't know if it'd be
Kind of
real.
romantic. It's kind of
Yeah, I suppose.
romantic. It's
But
like a movie. Yeah, it is somewhat. I mean, if you're going to
but
go, that's beautiful.
no, his wife enjoyed the life too. I remember seeing a photograph of her. They were going to be presented to the King of Italy. And apparently, that was really important those days. You get presented to the King of Italy. I guess it's in the late 1800s when they still had the king in Italy. And it shows a picture of him and her getting ready. And she apparently enjoyed all this stuff. Why wouldn't you? If you were her,
Oh,
why wouldn't you?
well, she would have to be if he was a social butterfly. She'd want to
Yeah.
be able to go and do things. So, looking at aspects of his personality, and as you got to know him by reading his diary, then did you ever make any comparisons in your life? Because you're you're really outgoing. You're really great with people. You're great with lots of people. I
I
mean,
suppose.
look at all
Yeah.
the articles you've written and all the activity, and I mean, that takes just not an average person could be that way.
Yeah, yeah, but that's kind of generalized. Did I find anything unique to him and I? Not really. People keep saying that. The interesting part is people also have a hard time believing that I don't believe in astrology or alien abduction. And people came to assume since I believe in reincarnation, I believe in all this other stuff too. But I tell them I don't, simply because prove it to me. I was a police officer
Right.
for a lot of years. Prove it to me, and I'll believe it. Now, I told you when I started saying reincarnation, I thought it was just a bunch of baloney. I thought this is just
Sure.
weak-minded people, but it was proven to me, so I believe it. But people have a hard time believing that I don't accept all these other things: astrology, crystal power, alien abductions, all these things. If I believe in this, but I only believe in this because it was proven to me beyond a doubt. And the same with the other thing. If somebody proves to me beyond a doubt that other things are true, then I'll believe in them. But I've always had a number of people just
Right.
act stunned that I don't believe in these other things. But again, as a cop, you have to prove to show me the facts, then I'll believe in them. But so far I haven't seen the facts other than reincarnation, obviously. But other than that, I haven't.
Now, have you done any more reincarnation?
No, I did the one with Doctor.
Regression?
I did with Doctor Griffiths before I knew anything, but I have done it since because anything now after reading his diary and all the research I've done, anything I experienced with Beckwith, you wouldn't know if it's valid or not. If I could actually go to regression and go back to Beckwith's life, would I know it was true, or would it be part of how would I know it wasn't part of just what I'd read and all this stuff? Because when I actually took the first question, I knew absolutely nothing about Beckwith, zero. I never read his name
Right.
because there is nothing about him. There's no books about him, no movies about him, no new magazine articles about him, nothing. He was basically a nobody. And so, but now I know everything about him. I know almost every day of his life from 19 on. So it'd be hard to say anything I saw, is it real or not real?
Right.
It'd be
Well,
hard to
what
prove.
about, I mean, what about other lives? Have you thought about looking at other lives or time
No, because
periods?
I told you I did it with Dr. Griffith the second time, and I went down to 3 past lives then, but they were
You're
all
like,
so far.
eh.
Yeah, but they were all very vivid and clear, but they were so far back in history. There's no way I can verify them. I don't,
Okay.
you can't really don't. Again, it's like the altar girl or the caveman. You can't verify those. The one I had the regression with Beckwith, and the other three I could. When I went the second time, there's no way I can verify them. So you really can't say they were real. I assume they probably were real since Beckwith was, but I can't
Right.
prove it. But I can't prove
I
it.
hear you. Well, I think it depends how your mind works. This is just how your mind works, and some people need that, some people don't. I ran a past life, and it was horrible because I was a slave owner in Kentucky, and I was just mean to everybody, my relatives, I was just not a nice person at that time. And I looked up my name, I looked at where I lived. Where I lived is no longer a part of Kentucky, and it is the town has changed, and I found the name before it changed, and it was like there. So I thought that was pretty cool. And I
Yeah.
also found owned railroad and cotton, and I looked and I found out the name, and I found out the name of the building, and I was just like, and I kind of was like real sad about that because I was like, do I really want to find out more? Because I think I'm a pretty nice person, but to know I was like like a villain in a past life, it just was not a happy thing for me. And that's the next question. Why do we have to experience so many lives? Why do we have to be, like you said, we're the pauper, we're the wealthy person, we're the victim, we're the bully, why is it that we have to see so many sides to things, do you think?
This is part of my problem is that I was a police officer for years and my job is investigation. Now, there's a lot of questions people ask me about, just like you're asking, but that's kind of for philosophers and theologians. I'm not a philosopher or theologian. And people have asked me a lot of times, what does this all mean? And tell you the truth, I really don't know. I really don't know
Yeah,
what it means or why. All I know is what
I,
I
there
set
it
out to
is.
investigate. And if I anything else is just speculation. Anything else I would say about what it means is just speculation because I'm not a philosopher or theologian, so I don't really know the implications of a lot of this stuff.
I haven't heard, it's a fair answer. I haven't, honestly, I've done a lot of past life and I don't know if I can answer that. I don't really know why. And I don't know why why suffering is even necessary. The other thing, I mean, I understand the death cycle. I mean, it's like flowers, they come back, but I don't understand why we have to know every freaking component of everything, of
I don't
every
know either. I,
experience. And when in
again,
the end, I really wish I don't have an answer for that either, because other people speak of this as well. So to you, this was just like a character, this you never identified at all with Carol.
no, not no, I really didn't. And it's one of those things. And the interesting part is, after it was over with, nothing else ever. People ask me about how because it was kind of an amazing experience of regression, but nothing's happened since. I mean, people want to think that's what happened. Have you done anything? Have you anything come? I haven't had any information in my work out. After the book was published, it's kind of like you've done your job, and everything. All that no
Right.
more information came about him. No, nothing and new come about it since then. And I think that maybe my job was. You're right. My job was done. I did what I had to do, and so my part's done. I don't get any more information. I don't, yeah, like Dr. Griffith said, I already know everything I need to know, and she's right. I mean, I've done it. I've done my job. I investigated. I found the proof. I wrote the book, and I think as far as the universe is concerned, you're out of it. Your job's done. You're out of it now.
Well, and the other thing is too, I think you seem like a realist to me. You're like, I'm here now. Let's just live this life. You know.
Well,
you
yeah,
know. Okay, good news that goes on. I guess
yeah.
it's good. You got a second shot. Good job.
And
So
truthfully, the whole thing was traumatic enough. I really wouldn't want to go through all this stuff again. I
yeah,
mean,
because you're the way your mind thinks. If you got another one, then you'd have to follow that trail, and then here you go
exactly.
again.
Yeah. But like I said, it did not end well for the police department. Actually, it kind of hurt my writing career too. Until
No
the
way.
time yeah, until this book come out, I've been publishing a book a year. Every year I write a different book. It was 6 years after Beckwith came out that I could get a book contract. My agent at the time warned me about this. She said, Bob, you write nonfiction about police work. If you write this book published, people won't take you serious anymore.
Are you
Oh,
serious?
I'm dead serious. But fortunately, enough time passes, people forget everything, and and I've been able to publish a lot of books. I published a lot of books since then, but it was 6 years for my next book come out, and I've been publishing. Like I said, matter of fact, the year I wrote Beckwith, I wrote another book. I wrote two books that year, and I mean, but after Beckwith came out, again it was 6 years before I got another contract. Fortunately, like in a lot of things in life, people forget. People move on, you
Um,
forget. So I got another contract, after that, and I've been writing books ever since.
Yeah, but to me, this is extraordinary. And I think you were right in the fact that, okay, there's something here. This is not a coincidence. And the fact this person's life, I mean, I think it's fascinating that you unraveled as much as you have. And it's good news that we do live forever. So we do get a second chance. Wonder why do you think? I mean, I'm just, there's no right or wrong answers here, but why do you think that so many religions, I'm not going to pick one, but just think we have this one life. Why how did that get started? Why do you think that
Well,
is?
people don't realize several thousand years ago, reincarnation was part of religions. It was part of the Jewish religion. It was part, it's part of Buddhist, the Hindu. But
Hmm.
I think again, people, I don't know why, why, but suddenly in the last couple thousand years, we've moved away from that. Now you can find several verses in the New Testament that talk about reincarnation, but it's pretty well diluted now. The story is that when Constantine made
Yeah.
the Christianity, the religion of the Roman
Hmm.
Empire,
Hmm.
they deleted
Removed.
passages in there to past lives simply because they want people to realize this life is not that important. So you don't have to necessarily feel that much loyalty or for the king and everything, because it's just one life of many. But for example, if you
Mm.
look in the Bible, where Jesus is asking his disciples, "Who do you say? Who do you think I am? Who do you think I am?" And some people would say that they thought they would make he was the prophet, the prophet Isaiah, I think, the prophet, because the
Mhm.
Bible says before he comes, the prophet Isaiah will return.
Yes.
Jesus tells them he did return, but they just didn't recognize him. And he's talking about John the Baptist.
John, yeah, John the Baptist,
Yeah,
who was earlier, what was it? Was it as not Enoch? It was the other Isaiah. He said, yeah, that's exactly in there. And he says he is John the Baptist.
yeah.
He said, "To those of you," and it was people skim over that, but yeah, they do. So it's I mean, it does open you up your world, I imagine, especially also dealing with the paranormal things with the police, because that definitely does happen too. So, and you know what, I thought the same thing about, I understand your point of view. When I first had it, I thought this is ridiculous, and then I saw myself being a guy, but then I saw all this stuff that I looked up in history. I said, oh my god, they used to do that. And so I thought, I was mildly, kind of bored about it. And the same thing with UFOs. I'm like, well, I'm sure they're out there somewhere. I don't know. And then I saw two this year, big ones. And my husband saw it, who's very analytical, and he's the one who saw it first. So it does help to get. We live in this physical plane. It does help to get proof. It just
Yeah.
does.
Oh, yeah. For me, it did. But you think about it. If you accept reincarnation, past lives, it makes the ideas of racism and sexism kind of silly, doesn't it?
Very
Yeah, yeah. It makes it kind of
bingo
makes it foolish. It makes,
down.
it makes the whole all both
Ridiculous.
concepts
Oh
both ridiculous, because
yeah.
whatever you're prejudiced against this life, you're liable to be in the next life, or you were the life before, and you're prejudiced against them. I mean, you think about it. If you really believe it, it does make a lot of concepts ridiculous.
Oh, it does. It does. I've seen male, female, all different races, all different things. I mean, I've done things on past life and past planets, but to be honest, I was kind of like you, a little bit like, and I've seen detail. I thought it was fascinating, but I can't prove that.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? I can't. I mean, what am I? I can't prove it. I've seen all sorts of stuff. I thought it was fascinating, like watching a movie, but how am I going to prove that? You know what I'm saying? People think, isn't it great? I'm like, well, yeah, I guess. I mean, it was interesting, it was entertaining, but I can't really. We don't have really history or knowledge of that unless there's a lot of people around the world that's getting the same thing. I
yeah.
have seen inventions. That's kind of cool, and that's interesting. So and then it just life is bigger, and there is, I think there's a little, there's grace for humanity, knowing that we can do a redo, and we can get this thing right. I always think it's funny though, like, did you ever see the movie Switch with like Ellen Barkin on it? It was a girl movie, but where she was like an obnoxious guy that would always hit on women, and she came back as a woman. And I think it's kind of true to a degree. We have to experience everything. So whatever the thing that we hate the most is probably what we would be like next time,
Yeah,
or whatever we need to experience. Um, that's what how can someone be like that when then that's almost begging the universe to let us experience that. But yeah, this is fascinating. The fact that you carried this far, and even the New Orleans things gets me. That's cool, because somehow it's like you were sending out signals to the universe, however that works. And through your wife said, "Hey, let's go to New Orleans." I mean, you could have gone anywhere.
see, at
But
the very end of my investigation, that I prove everything. Then you got to think, why did you find? Were you guided to go to New Orleans? I mean, what are the odds of picking the city out of the blue? My wife picked, as a matter of fact, going there and finding this painting. So you have to wonder, were you guided? Was there some guidance from the universe?
yeah,
And that's kind of one of the reasons I wrote this
yeah.
book. Simply because after I proved it all, you're thinking, well, Bob, you were the odds of you just doing it on your own are just astronomical. They really are, just after going there and finding it. So I'm thinking, were you guided by the universe? So maybe the
I,
universe obviously wanted you to have this
I,
information. So that's
yeah.
kind of one of the reasons I published the book, because obviously somebody greater than me and in charge
Hmm.
decide I need this information. And why would I need this information? And I'm a writer. Why would I need information if I wouldn't write about it?
Well, yeah, this was, I mean, this is how it works. I don't know, but you're right. This is too, you could have gone to India. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? You could
yeah.
have gone anywhere. I mean, you could
We could have gone to California or Florida. Yeah, we went to New
anything.
Orleans.
Yeah, you could have gone anywhere in the whole world, but no, you went to New Orleans. So, To me, yeah, you were being guided. I always say we have team guide. I don't know how the plan is and the guides and how, for us, but we send, you wonder if it's set up ahead of time, but you sent out, hey, I'm ready to know. And they said it. I don't know how they do it, but they work through other people like your wife, because that to me is the pivotal point when you saw that and you were like, oh my gosh. And who paints a hunchback woman?
Yeah, yeah.
Like, who does that? That's so weird.
I forgot
And
to mention. I forgot to mention my thing. By the way, I told you I couldn't find it again. But if I in the 1912 Diaries of Beckwith, he mentions 3 times painting a portrait of a hunchback woman. That's
see
because I was really worried about the fact that I can't find a painting. Nobody ever contacted me. Would people believe it? But I looked at his diaries, 1912, and he mentions 3 different times in 1912 about painting the portrait of a hunchback woman.
wonder why he ever did that. That's so odd. Do you know what I
Well,
mean? It's not like a sunset or a still life painting, with some fruit or something.
I wonder if they're keep the painting for an investment or think it's going to grow. And by the way,
Mm.
Beckwith's paintings really haven't gained that much. Yeah, but interesting enough, and to talk about a coincidence that happened, I got a call from a lady that found out about my book, that I was writing the book, because I had talked to a number of people in the art gallery, and found out they were setting up a show exhibition of Beckwith's work in New York City. I'm trying to think of it's a really upscale gallery, and interesting enough, the exhibition was going to open the same day my book come out, the exact same day.
I
And
don't
she
think that's a coincidence, but I don't know
yeah,
how it works.
yeah,
Again,
but
how it
yeah,
works, I don't
but,
know.
but we didn't know about it. Neither of us knew about each other. But what they wanted to contact me about, they wanted to know if I knew whether there were any Beckwith paintings that were for sale, because they wanted to, you could have somebody
Mm.
consign them there, and they would try to sell them. But I thought it was kind of interesting that they would do a show. And I asked her, I says, why would you want to do Beckwith? I says, his paintings have never brought any kind of serious money ever. Why would you want to? She said,
Fun.
I don't remember. It just seemed like a good idea at the time. And interesting enough, the show went on for 30 days and they didn't sell a single painting, not one.
Oh, you're kidding.
His
Isn't that
work's not that
wild?
good. His work's simply not that good. And they were charging outrageous prices for it. I went to, needless to say, I had to go to New York to see that, to see the exhibition, needless to say.
Yeah.
But
Did,
they were charging, his painting is simply not that, his stuff is not that good. But they were charging way more than they were worth. If they didn't, in 30 days, they didn't sell a single painting, not one.
when you said they weren't that great, I wonder what inspired him to be an artist. I mean, he obviously wanted to, and his mother supported
I mean,
him.
it wasn't, terrible painting. I mean, it wasn't like a 8-year-old child painting. It was
Right.
again, it was competent
Decent.
painting. It was decent, competent painting, but it was no life to his paintings.
Got it.
You look at famous paintings, there's always a life to them. You can see the vitality
Hmm.
of the
Hmm.
person in the painting.
Hmm.
Beckwith could see for some reason couldn't do that with his paintings. His paintings did not have the same, because I remember the time I told you he made $1,000 is that John Singer Sargent had got the contract to paint the portraits of Vanderbilt, the gentleman who owns the big house in North Carolina.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
very,
Yeah.
very, very rich person. Well,
Biltmore.
for some reason, I'm not sure why, whenever you had a portrait painted by somebody like Sargent, you always had 2 copies made. Okay.
Huh.
I'm not sure why. Well, he talked Vanderbilt into hiring Beckwith to make the copies. And Beckwith had a difficult time copying his paintings because he said he couldn't quite
With the
grasp
light source.
the technique that Sargent had used. That Sargent had painted Vanderbilt a very good portrait, and Beckwith again would pay $1,000 to make a copy of it. And again, that's because they two were friends. He was trying to help Beckwith out, but I know Beckwith has talked about his diary about having a real hard time copying what he had done.
I just think all this is just fascinating. I mean, this is really fascinating, and and also spiritually, it's very hopeful for people listening,
Yeah,
because I mean, you get a redo if it's not exactly what you like. I mean, you can't you
or
get another shot.
this is a life where you have to experience life being a failure. I mean, your life before might have been you were big, immensely successful, type
True.
thing. This is a life
True.
where you're not going to experience that, and you have to live. What's the circle? How do you live, and what's all the different things that happen to you when you're not a successful person? When you're only mediocrely successful, and you probably have to live life one time when you're a total failure. And it's just, man, who knows? I mean, this is all guesswork on my part, since I
I
don't
think
really
you're right.
know it
Yeah,
all.
no,
But
right, right. Well, we're just coming up with some some thoughts on that. But I think you're right. I think that, I mean, if you had been wildly successful in a past life and your family was wealthy, you could have everything you want. Wouldn't you need to learn humility? Wouldn't you need to learn
Yeah.
what it's like to just be maybe an average Joe? And a lot of these past lives, you're not Cleopatra. You're just
No,
a
no,
regular person.
no.
You're just a person.
And
You know,
that is part of the problem. Dr. Griffith told me she got several hundred people come to her after my book come out, wanted to have past life regressions. But most of them, like you said, you go to a person and you're like you're a farmer in Iowa in the 1880s named John, and that's all
yeah,
yeah, and then that's it. I mean, you were a farmer your whole
right.
life and you died, and that's all.
Yeah.
And then so there's nothing really
Mhm.
exciting happened to you. And people, she said a lot of people are disappointed because they were also. I didn't realize what I had was called a full sensory regression. Apparently, full sensory regressions are very rare. They don't happen in office that often, and people were expecting the same thing, and they didn't. They didn't. Again, they'd see some foggy memories of
Yeah.
being a farmer in 1880 Iowa, and again, how exciting is that? I think I'm like you. I think
Got
they go
it.
there expecting you're going to be Napoleon
Got it. But
somebody,
usually not.
somebody big who had a great adventurous life, and a lot of times you don't.
No, that's exactly right. But you're right. When you could, I ran my first time I ran a past life regression about 25 years ago or so. I was a man. I looked down. I was a little teeny man, and I was in armor. And I'm going, "What is this?" And I opened my eyes and said, "Keep going." And I'm like, and I go through it. But what I remembered is loving the horses so much, like my favorite horse. And I was surprised that I had an emotion about it, and touching and feeling things. But I could remember the emotion of and not liking certain people. I'm like, "Oh God, I wish they wouldn't talk." Like I remember that, and it's personal. So it's fascinating to me, and you think all of those things are hidden somewhere. All these lives
Yeah.
we've had, and somehow we pull from them, and we somehow become this version of whoever we are now. But I think we pull from it. But I think what you mentioned early on in the beginning of our talk about how certain people can't get through certain ailments, and they go through the doctors, they do all this stuff, nobody can find out what's wrong, and then they do past life, and then they go, "Oh, that's what's going on there," and
And
that
now it makes sense.
and it makes sense. And usually, many times, it will go away. Or if you see like bullet holes on people that you can see the scar, there's no reason it should be, because they shouldn't have that. So that is something that can help people if there's no other solution. But I tell you what you've done is fascinating, and it's courageous. It really is courageous, and is honorable, because you did it because you knew that, hey, people need to know about this, and it took a lot of courage, even though you knew this might not, this may fall on deaf ears to certain people I work with, but you did it anyway. And so I think it's gutsy, and it's helping people.
Well, if I had to do it all over again, I'd do the same thing. I mean, I'd had fair warning from people, my agent, my wife, that this is going to turn bad, and it did. But again, there's too much stuff in this in my thing that, like I said, just was too strange to be coincidence. It's kind of like the universe just guide you. And to me, it was
Very much.
too important to be quiet about. My wife's advice, it still is, but she never has accepted any of this. Is that I should have just been quiet about it and let it go and go to my grave with it. But I didn't think that was the cause. That wasn't the reason all these things happened to me. They happened to me for a reason, and I had to
Hmm.
basically had to tell the world about it, whether I wanted to or not. No matter
Yeah.
how bad it turned out for me, I feel like it should. This is a story that need to be told.
And you completed it, and you did it, and you told his story too. And I think it's to me, it's just so fascinating, and that you took it to this level. I mean, this was definitely meant to happen. I do have a question about the little girl. You said that's your daughter in this life.
Yes.
And so, how did that affect, by knowing that, and knowing that, was there any, did you
Well, actually, that's where
crossover?
something kind of bizarre happened. Is after my book, I wrote my book and everything, and I let my kids read the book before it come out, so they'd be prepared in case there was any flack on this. And my daughter
Okay.
asked me if Beckwith had a brother, and she gave me his name. And I had never mentioned that in my book. I don't think it's mentioned anywhere. And
Well, your
that was,
daughter said that.
yeah. And she wanted to know, did he have a brother named so and so? And he did. And I did. It's not mentioned in my book, and it really there was no real point to mention it. But she knew his brother's name. Now, I don't know how you explain that. I thought that was just kind of bizarre that she knew what a Beckwith's brother's name.
That is really bizarre. And so
Yeah,
you found
yeah,
out that was true. That
yeah,
is
yeah.
bizarre. Well, so that there's a thought. Okay, I don't know if this is true or not, but the holographic universe, that where our mind, our consciousness goes on, which we say, okay, well, I'll go along with that. Consciousness goes on, but our mind pulls our experiences, the mind of God, the mind of us mesh with that experiences to us.
I don't
That's
know.
one thing. And so maybe what I'm saying, there's a collective knowledge. Where is it? I don't know. Can't touch it. That maybe she tapped into this collective knowledge of, it could be that too. It could be that a version of Carol's talking to her. I mean, I don't know. I
I
mean,
don't either. I
I
don't know
don't
how
know.
it happened. I just thought it was really bizarre when she asked
It
him
is bizarre.
because again,
I don't.
yeah, she did. She, I mean, it was in my notes, but I didn't put it in the book or anything. So she would not. But she knew what his brother's name was. You know.
That is wild. I mean, that makes you wonder right there, because that's a big mystery. So
Yeah.
I think what you've done is outstanding. Everybody buy this book. It's Portrait of a Past Life Skeptic, the true story of a police detective, Reincarnation. This is simply amazing. And of course, you can find this at Amazon and purchase it there. So did you, I want to leave any final words, anything about spirituality you want to pass along
No,
or
again,
anything?
I'm not much on spirituality. I mean, again, it's not my field. Investigation is my field, and then beyond that, I'm just guessing, like everybody, like a
Well,
philosopher and theologian. I'm just guessing what it all means. I don't have any explanation for it really, other than I can only tell you what happened.
so let me ask you this in final closing. How did this big picture, how did this change your life? Because it's a pretty amazing story.
Well, again, like I said, it wasn't easy, but it gives you. Again, I think this view of the world is a better view than my old
I
view
like it
was,
too.
only
It's
because
nicer.
everything's fair. I mean, it really is.
Mhm.
Life, because if you look from a Judeo-Christian point of view, life is not fair. Life is bad people get away with things and never have to pay for it. Good people get hurt for no reason, type thing, and it
Right.
doesn't make any sense. Whereas you look in reincarnation point of view, yeah, it all makes sense. Because you're going to redo that in the next life. You're going to, who if you're really evil in this life, you're probably going to be a victim in your next life.
You're exactly right.
You're going to experience the same thing. So it does all even out. I mean, it's not it's not unfair as it looks if you only have one life.
So would you consider that karma?
Oh, big time. Karma, yeah.
You're like,
Karma will bite you real bad. Yeah, they will. Yeah, it will.
it's true. You're right. It does even out. Well, look, you have been a real blessing. Everybody, buy the book, and I've got all the links below so they can purchase it. And thank you so much, Robert, for your time.
Well, thank you for having me on your show. I appreciate it.
Oh, you're certainly welcome.